Why controlling yourself is harder than ruling the world. Lao Tzu, have you ever noticed that the hardest battles are the ones no one sees? You can win arguments, build companies, lead armies, and even shape nations and still lose to yourself. That's the terrifying brilliance behind Lao Tzu's ancient observation: he who conquers others is strong, he who conquers himself is mighty. And yet, nearly everyone alive today is sprinting to rule something outside of themselves: money, fame, influence, when the real battlefield is within. That's what we're going to uncover. Why is it that we can dominate the world, but we struggle to control the way we speak to someone we love when we're angry? Why can we lead others but can't lead ourselves out of bed in the morning? Why is it easier to change a law than to change a habit? Let's not pretend for a second that this is just a philosophical riddle. This is your life. You are in a constant tug of war between the version of you that you want to be and the version of you that shows up when things get hard. And the irony: you're both the ruler and the rebel, the dictator and the dissenter. You are the world you're trying to rule. So when Lao Tzu said this cryptic, almost poetic line, he wasn't just being wise, he was being devastatingly accurate. And I'm telling you right now, if you don't master yourself, something else will. And it won't care what dreams you had.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Here's the truth we don't like to admit: self-control isn't sexy. It doesn't get applause. Nobody claps for you when you pass up the donut or when you choose not to send that angry text. But these invisible victories are precisely what build an unshakable life. Because self-control isn't about denying pleasure, it's about choosing power. It's about saying, I will not be mastered by my impulses. And that's a revolutionary statement in a world where everything is designed to hijack your attention, your cravings, your emotions. Think about it. Every app is designed to pull you in. Every ad is designed to make you feel like you're missing out. Every platform is built to amplify your most reactive self. So what happens? You become ruled, not by a king, not by an oppressor, but by your own untrained mind. That's the hardest tyranny to escape. Now let me ask you something uncomfortable. When's the last time you said no to yourself? And I mean a real no, not just a delay, not a compromise, but a cold, decisive no. Most of us go days, weeks, even years without truly exercising that inner authority. We rationalize, we negotiate, we say just this once. But every time you do that, you give your inner rebel more power. And here's the scary part: the more you give in, the harder it becomes to resist. You're not just reinforcing a habit. You're reinforcing a hierarchy. You're telling your lower self, you're in charge here. And trust me, that part of you does not have your future in mind. This is why controlling yourself is harder than ruling the world. Because ruling the world is external. It's visible. You can use force, charisma, money, strategy. But ruling yourself, that requires something infinitely rarer: humility. The recognition that you are both flawed and capable. That you are not your thoughts, but you are responsible for them. That you can feel an emotion without obeying it. That you can have a desire without bowing to it. And that's a radical idea in a world that tells you to follow your heart no matter where it leads. But what if your heart is confused? What if your heart hasn't healed? What if what you want now is exactly the opposite of what you'll need later? Let's go deeper. Imagine you were given absolute power over a nation. You could change laws, move markets, control armies, but you couldn't stop yourself from scrolling TikTok at 2 a.m. Or you couldn't stop sabotaging your own relationships. Would you really be powerful? Or would you just be another emperor with no clothes, dressed in influence but naked in discipline? That's what Lao Tzu was warning us about. The illusion of power is seductive. It makes you think you're in control. But real control begins where no one is looking. It's in the moment you choose silence over sarcasm. It's in the breath you take before reacting. It's in the decision to do the hard thing when the easy thing is screaming your name. And here's the twist: the more you master yourself, the less you need to rule others. Because when you're grounded, centered, and clear, people feel it. You don't need to dominate them. They naturally follow your calm. That's why the greatest leaders in history, think Gandhi, Lincoln, Mandela, weren't just powerful in the world. They were powerful within. They had the ability to suffer without becoming bitter, to love without being naive, and to act with strength and restraint. That's not magic. That's trained mastery. That's inner leadership. So now I'll ask you this: what if the reason the world feels chaotic is because we've abandoned the very thing that could bring it peace, self-control? What if the wars we see outside are just reflections of the wars we've lost inside? What if every time you choose discipline, you're not just helping yourself, you're healing the world in some small, invisible way? Maybe the revolution isn't out there. Maybe the revolution is inside you. The prison of pleasure, how comfort cripples the soul. We live in an age where nearly every discomfort has been eliminated. Hungry? Order food. Bored? Scroll endlessly. Lonely? Swipe right. Tired? Caffeine. Anxious? Numb it. And yet, with all this convenience, all this comfort, all this unprecedented access to pleasure, why are we more restless, more depressed, more lost than ever before? The answer is brutal, but it's also liberating. Comfort is not the cure. It's the cage, and the more you chase it, the weaker you become. Lao Tzu's wisdom echoes louder than ever here. Real strength doesn't come from having everything you want, it comes from mastering the part of you that always wants more. Think about it. Every time we reach for something to soothe us, food, entertainment, validation, we are reinforcing a belief: I can't handle this moment as it is. We're teaching ourselves that discomfort is the enemy. But discomfort is not the enemy. In fact, discomfort might be the only thing honest enough to tell you the truth about yourself. It's in the discomfort of rejection that you discover your self-worth. It's in the discomfort of failure that you uncover your resilience. It's in the discomfort of silence that you finally hear your own voice. But if you numb that discomfort with the sugar of temporary pleasure, you never grow. You just repeat. You just loop. You just survive. Here's a hard question. When did we start confusing pleasure with happiness? Because they're not the same. Pleasure is a momentary hit. It spikes, it fades, and then it demands more. Happiness is quieter. It's built, not bought. It's earned, not given. And it doesn't come from comfort, it comes from competence. From knowing that you can do hard things. And from trusting yourself enough to sit with boredom without needing a screen, to sit with sadness without needing distraction, to sit with desire without needing to act. That's the hidden power of discomfort. It trains you to be free. But pleasure trains you to be dependent. This is why controlling yourself is harder than ruling the world, because the world will reward you for indulging. It will cheer you on when you binge, when you overreact, when you choose what feels good right now. But mastery is lonely. No one sees the reps you put in at 5 a.m. No one applauds the moment you don't say the thing you wanted to say. No one celebrates the night you chose rest over revenge. But those moments, they're the bricks of your inner empire. And the people who build that empire, they don't just survive, they lead. They don't just react, they shape reality. Let me ask you something. What does your comfort cost you? Not just in money, in potential, in discipline, in self-respect. Every time you choose the easy thing over the right thing, you're not just making a small decision, you're shifting your identity. You're telling your subconscious, this is who I am. And over time, that identity becomes a prison. You become the person who always needs the reward to act, who always needs permission to try, who always needs the world to be soft in order to feel strong. But life won't always be soft. Loss will come. Pain will visit. Change will demand your attention. And if you've built your life on comfort, you'll crumble. But if you've built your character on challenge, you'll rise. Here's the paradox. True freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's having the strength not to. It's walking past the junk food, the toxic relationship, the quick fix, not because you're denying yourself joy, but because you've trained yourself to want something higher. You've seen the cost of cheap pleasure, and you've chosen something richer: peace, purpose, power. That's the kind of control Lao Tzu pointed to. Not rigid, not robotic, but rooted. Rooted in the wisdom to know that the path to greatness is paved with discomfort, and that those who can sit with that fire without flinching, those are the ones who shape history. So I'll leave you with this. What's the one comfort you're clinging to that's quietly stealing your strength? And what would happen if, just for today, you let it go? Not because you have to, but because you can. Because mastery starts with one moment of truth, one moment where you say, I am not my craving. I am not my fear. I am not my comfort. I am the one who chooses. The myth of motivation. Why discipline is your only freedom. Everywhere you look, you're being told to chase motivation. Watch this video. Read that book. Listen to this podcast. And maybe for a moment, it works. You feel the spark, the surge, the sudden clarity to act. But then the spark fades, the surge crashes, and the clarity dissolves. And you're right back where you started, staring at the same goals, but with the same old excuses. This is the myth that motivation will save you. That if you just wait for the right feeling, the right moment, the right alignment of stars, you'll finally become who you're supposed to be. But Lao Tzu wouldn't have bought into that for a second. Because he understood something most of us don't. Freedom doesn't live in feelings, it lives in discipline. And the person who waits for motivation is always a slave to circumstance. Let's be real. Motivation is a mood, and moods are liars. They tell you what feels good, not what leads to good. They whisper, you've done enough, when you've barely started. They say, you deserve a break, when what you need is a breakthrough. They tell you, you're not in the right headspace, when the truth is, Your headspace is the very thing that needs changing. If you live your life by your moods, you'll only act when it's easy, which means you'll never do anything that matters. Because all the things that matter, building a business, healing from trauma, staying faithful in a relationship, writing a book, raising a child, none of them are easy. They are forged in the fire of consistency. And consistency doesn't come from motivation. It comes from discipline. Discipline is the invisible architecture of greatness. It's the quiet force that says, I don't feel like it, so what? It's not emotionless. It's not robotic. It's just committed. It's the part of you that doesn't need to be inspired because it's decided. And once you've decided, you've already won half the battle. Because most people never decide. They flirt with greatness. They date potential. They binge on dreams and starve on execution. But the disciplined person, they show up on the days it rains, on the days it hurts, on the days no one's watching. That's real power. That's inner sovereignty. That's what it means to rule yourself. You want to know why controlling yourself is harder than ruling the world? Because the world can be manipulated with strategy. People can be influenced with charisma. But your inner world, that requires something deeper than charm. It requires integrity. It requires you to show up when no one claps, and to hold the line when no one checks on you, to keep the promise you made to yourself, even when it doesn't feel good anymore. That's discipline. And it's the most underrated superpower in the modern world. Let me ask you something raw. How many things in your life have you started but never finished? How many promises have you made to yourself and broken? How many times have you said, "This is it, this is the time," only to collapse when the motivation ran out? What if the problem isn't your ambition, but your addiction to motivation? What if the real path forward isn't more hype, but more honesty? The kind of honesty that says, I'm not waiting to feel ready anymore. I'm training myself to be ready. That's what discipline does. It doesn't ask you to feel. It asks you to act. And in acting, you become. Here's the twist no one tells you. Discipline actually creates motivation, not the other way around. When you act, even when you don't feel like it, you create momentum. And momentum breeds clarity. And clarity fuels purpose. And purpose ignites real, lasting motivation, not the kind that fades in 24 hours, but the kind that burns for a lifetime. So, if you're waiting for motivation to show up before you start, you'll be waiting forever. But if you start, motivation will find you. Not because you chased it, but because you became someone it respects. So I'll leave you with this. What would your life look like if you stopped negotiating with your emotions and started honoring your commitments? What would happen if you stopped seeking the spark and started becoming the flame? Not a flicker, not a flash, but a steady, unshakable fire. That's what discipline gives you. Not just results, but identity. The kind of identity that says, I do what I say. I show up. I lead myself. And once you can lead yourself, the world becomes irrelevant because you've already won the hardest war, the one inside you. The warrior in the mirror, becoming the person you're afraid to be. There's someone watching you every single day. They see your hesitation, your compromises, your silent promises made then broken. They know when you lie, when you slack off, when you pretend. And they don't forget. That person is you, the version of you that lives in the mirror. You can fool the world, but you can't fool that reflection. And deep down, you know it. You know that every excuse you make carves a deeper crack in your confidence. Every time you betray your own word, you chip away at your self-respect. And every time you back away from discomfort, you widen the distance between who you are and who you were meant to become. That's why Lao Tzu's words hit so hard. Because ruling the world is external, it's performative. But ruling yourself, that's personal. That's the moment you finally face the one thing you've been avoiding your whole life, you. Let me ask you something piercing. Who would you be if you actually lived in alignment with your highest self? Not the fake, polished version you post online. The real one. The one you glimpse in your best moments, the one who's courageous, disciplined, honest, focused, kind, powerful. And that version of you exists. But they're not given. They're built. And the only way to build them is to confront the parts of you that are scared to grow. Because growth is violent. It requires you to shed identities, to let go of comfort, to step into the unknown without a safety net. And most people aren't willing to pay that price. They'd rather stay small and comfortable than become big and responsible. But you're not most people. You're watching this because something in you knows the life you want is on the other side of becoming the person you're afraid to be. What does that person look like? They say no when it's hard. They delay gratification. They train when they're tired. They speak the truth, even when their voice shakes. They hold themselves to a higher standard not because anyone's watching, but because they are. And they don't need motivation because they're guided by mission. They don't need validation because they're rooted in self-respect. They don't chase comfort because they've tasted purpose and nothing else satisfies. That's the warrior in the mirror. And they're not mythical. They're waiting for you to show up. But to become them, you have to let part of you die. The part that needs to be liked. The part that needs to feel good to do good. The part that blames instead of takes ownership. That's not a small death, it's a funeral. But what's buried in that moment is weakness. And what rises is strength. Not the loud, ego-driven strength you see on social media, but quiet, unshakable strength, the kind you carry in your spine, the kind that walks into any room and doesn't need to prove a thing because it knows who it is. And do you know what's wild? When you finally master yourself, you stop needing to rule anything else. You don't need to dominate the world because you've already conquered the hardest kingdom, your own mind. You become the kind of person who leads not by force, but by example. Not by control, but by calm. Not by fear, but by vision. That's what Lao Tzu meant. That's the power hiding behind that ancient line. And it's not just poetry, it's prophecy. It's the kind of truth that doesn't just inform you, it demands something from you. So I'll leave you with this final question. What if the most heroic thing you could ever do isn't to change the world, but to change yourself so completely that the world around you has no choice but to respond? What if greatness isn't out there waiting for you, but within you, waiting to be unleashed? Because at the end of the day, the most powerful person in the world isn't the one who rules nations. It's the one who rules their own soul. Now go look in the mirror and meet the warrior.